Well, welcome, Tim Ash. I am so glad to have you here.
Thanks, Jenny Lynn. Great to be
Uh,
with you.
and I am so glad because you have just a fascinating story and you are a brilliant human being. And so I can't wait to dive into all the different vectors of your brain and experience and how you bring this all together between work and life.
Oh,
So
wow. Well, with that kind of intro, there's only one direction to go, down. All right.
never. So you're in season 2, and we get to start in the heart of the messy middle, and we're going to start right at your moment. What was that moment where you stared down your relationship with work and realized, "Holy crap, this is not what it needs to be"?
Let's see. I'm destroying my family relationships. I'm not making any money. I'm working way too hard, and I'm pissing off my coworkers and clients. So that was about 5 years ago.
A little bit of anger in there, maybe, Tim.
Oh, perhaps. Yeah. No.
So
And
you,
the worst part was like this, it's self-inflicted,
yeah.
and I've been on this road for 20 years. And it's like, oh my God, what the hell am I doing with my life? Yeah.
So you mentioned a lot of things, which meant that you probably walked through a bunch of trails before you got to that moment. Oh, describe to me in detail that exact moment, like where you were like, boom, 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 like all of it started stacking up and you're like, whoa, I missed something along the way.
I think the main thing was just the price. I realized I finally was waking up to the damage I'd done to my family.
Mhm.
And that's something that some people don't talk very much about, in this pursuit of work and finances. I mean, something's got to give. And I figured, my wife would keep the home fires burning and take care of the 2 kids. And, I can just go out there and be the breadwinner, the caveman that brings back the dead antelope or whatever. And I didn't realize what a psychological price not only I was paying, but my whole family was paying. That's when I decided to do a lot of personal growth work as well. And the
And that's got to be a hard moment to realize that all those people who you love, who depend on you, and you had been doing the right thing, the best thing with what you knew at the time, right? You were
yeah.
doing the thing that you knew how to do with what you knew. And it wasn't actually the best thing at that moment.
No, I was just working in one mode, which is, get shit done mode, GSD
Yeah.
mode, just like if I just work a little bit harder, then I'll have all the good payoffs. And but it changed me. I became this, working, like I said, in one mode only. And I guess in Jungian terms, you'd call that the warrior archetype.
Hmm.
And that's the problem, is I was bringing the warrior home to my family. And so I was like bossy and controlling, and it's like, you'll do what I say because I said it. It's like, well, that worked okay until they became teenagers, and then it kind of doesn't work anymore. And
I've got a couple of teens. Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, I interrupted you. So sorry. So you were talking about teenagers. What was that moment then where you were looking at your teens and you were like, oh, this isn't working?
This isn't the way I want to show up as a parent. That was really what it was about. What kind of legacy do I want to leave? What imprint am I having on them? It was really much more of a recalibration of purpose at the purpose level, I would say, instead of being on autopilot. So it all came together, and it's almost like this buildup of a charge in a capacitor or battery, and then it's just like you get the lightning and like this big discharge, and it was just like, yeah, none of this stuff is directionally going the right direction. So
Yeah.
that's what it felt like, and something needs to change, and that something needed to start with me. But that's a
Yeah.
whole nother story.
And that's what we're going to be diving into. But talking about it, what signs did you miss then about your kids, and that you mentioned the damage, and we've all caused damage, by the way.
Mhm.
I'm so much guilty of that. I joke on a regular basis. My kids I'm going to screw them up. It's just a matter of how much and do they recover is kind
Yeah,
of.
I mean, the only question is, will they be able to afford enough good psychiatrist time to deal with it and unpack it later? But that's their problem. Hopefully they'll
Yeah,
have good careers.
exactly. So exactly. So what part of this, what signs did you miss that maybe part of this was your problem to solve?
It's just I didn't really or understand my own personality. The fact that my drive was so important to me, that achieving these goals. I guess I have a personality typing frameworks. I don't know if you're familiar with the Enneagram. I'm a type
Mhm.
7, but I have a wing 8, which basically means like I bull my way through life and like go out there and make plans and try to make those visions a reality, which I think a lot of entrepreneurs and workaholics are that way,
Mhm.
but then you have to say, where's that drive come from? And it's really kind of an unhealthy maladaptation, I guess you could say, to what's causing that. Are you doing it consciously, or are you doing it subconsciously? And I guess I signed up for like the socially conventional thing, which is just like, business success and CEO of a company, and write books, run conferences, all of that stuff. And too much of my identity was wrapped up in the work role. That's the
Mhm.
problem. It was completely unbalanced in that direction.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, changing your identity is hard. So tell me a little bit more. You got to that moment, you realized, gosh, I'm showing up with this drive, but this drive is killing everything in my path that matters to me.
yeah,
And
yeah.
you had to change your identity and get through the anger, because we have to obviously get through it to actually get to the other side of it. We don't get to ignore the fact that we're angry. How did that journey start? What was your first step?
Well, a friend of mine had gone through this men's initiation weekend
Mhm.
about a decade before this happened, and I saw this really transformative change in him.
Mm.
He's had a lot of rough edges, but then when he went through this, he just kind of went much more deeply into life and took a look at what he was doing and why. And he said, "Hey, why don't you check out this men's initiation weekend?" And I said, "I saw the change in you, and I don't need to know anything about it. In fact, I don't want to know anything about it, and
Because
I'm
then you
just
might
going to
check it
go
out.
do it." Yeah. Well, no, I mean, I'm not known for being the cowardly lion, but just because I think you don't initiation experiences for the most part are deliberately designed to put you in a state of uncertainty so you can be more open to changes. And so I didn't want to preview, like I didn't want my head knowledge of what was coming up to get in the way of actually being in the moment. So I'm like, whatever it is, I know it's going to be psychologically safe enough, and I've seen the transformation in you. Sign me up.
I love that. I love that. And you captured a really important point there, that when we know everything, we're not we're not always as open. And so the more that we can leave ourselves open to the moment, the more we can actually learn and develop from it. And it sounds like you put yourself right out there in day one, head first.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny because this all comes full circle. You and I met in the heroic public
Mhm.
speaking program,
Mhm.
the professional development program, and my latest speech is about polarization. And I talk about how do you bond in polarized tribes. Well, one of the ingredients is to create uncertainty.
Mhm.
That then we're much more receptive to everything around it. If you stay in your little safe box, or in the immortal words of Pink Floyd, become comfortably numb,
Mhm.
and then nothing's going to change. Then you're just going to say, oh, I want my latte and my yoga class, and my watch sunsets and hang out with my friends and watch Netflix. And okay, I mean, I do a lot of that too, but except for the latte, I'm a tea drinker.
There
But
you go.
I don't really I think that putting yourself outside your comfort zone, I did in the work sphere, that was no problem. I took all kinds of crazy risks. I borrowed,
Mhm.
money from my retired mom to start her business. I had several near the edge financial conversations with my wife. It's like, if you can't reliably bring home this amount by this date, then you need to go and get a real job and stop farting around. So those
Which
those
for
conver-
us entrepreneurs is like Please no.
Yeah, so I mean, I've taken plenty of risks in my life. It was just directed at more like self-change and inner growth. I think for me, those chapters happen when there's a significant pain. That's the only reason to change. So after my dad died, I had one of these soul searching episodes when I was 25. And this was another one of those. It's kind of like the pressure builds up and the log jam breaks, but it's only because of pain. You know, go, I just want to keep working on being a better person without any reason for doing that. I mean, I think no one ever has done that in the history of the world.
Yeah, there is. It's this whole idea of needing a catalyst, needing an inciting event of some sort. And the question is, do you need it to come to you, or can you actually manufacture it? Which I have seen some people successfully do as well. Essentially put themselves in a situation. They know they need to change. They know the pain's not great enough to make the change right now. So how do they actually use an event in order to catapult them, like get the push over the cliff?
Yeah. And, you know, I remember I was working at this big defense contractor a long time ago. And the last 6 months there, I knew I didn't want to be there. I spent bitching and moaning to my coworkers about what a shitty place it was to work. And that was kind of my own way of reaching escape velocity. And so then I punched out of the company, but, you know, I had to manufacture that level of discomfort by telling that story to as many people around me as I could.
Our stories are so powerful, aren't they?
Yes, I'm afraid so.
So you had this experience at 25 with your first round of soul searching, and then another one, and more recently in the last 5 years. What was similar and different about them?
Well, one was due to, I guess you'd call it an externally applied loss. Okay. And my dad dying when I was 25. And, you know, you can't do anything about that stuff, and you just deal with the flood and the grief and all of the aftermath of that. And that was definitely transformational on a lot of levels for me. And, but this was more of I did this to myself, and that was much harder to admit. And so I think, you know, as entrepreneurs, many of us tend to be a bit stubborn. I mean, you have to basically ignore the world telling you why things won't work, and, you know, flip them the double bird and say, fuck you, right? And I'm going to do it anyway. And so that stubbornness can be an asset. And so is a positivity bias, because, you know, evolutionarily we're biased towards negative information about 2 to 1. So I think most entrepreneurs have to be optimistic by their nature. So you put together driven, positive, and stubborn, and you basically just keep going down the same road for too long. And in my case, that was 25-year odyssey of running professional services firms, and probably about 10 years of that was just due to those inertia factors.
Yeah. So it sounds like, you know, we all, and I've done this before, rationalizing and telling stories about explaining the world around us and fitting it into a mental model we can understand, right? Which then gets us moving down these pathways. So you had this other pathway. You faced the mirror. You said, okay, I did this to myself. It's self-inflicted. You signed up for this initiation weekend, which, by the way, kudos to you. You figured out.
By the way, that was an organization called the Mankind Project, which I'd recommend literally to any man who. It's the idea is to give you a healthy retroactive initiation, the kind you would have gotten in a traditional society as a teenager, most likely. But we don't have those rituals or circles of fully open men to initiate other men anymore.
Yeah. And you're speaking to a challenge in our society that I don't think is served and spoken about enough. Like, you know, as a female, I was raised that I can build close, intimate relationships and talk to people and work through, you know, that kind of stuff. But not only do we have societal pressures on us as women, but so do you as men. And
here's a stat for you: 90% of men in prison grew up without a father figure. That pretty much tells you everything you need to know right there.
Yeah. It's a huge component. I don't know if you've ever read, for our listeners. So War in the Soul is a book about PTSD for soldiers, and they talk
Mhm.
about a lot of the different things. It's applied more to a veteran situation, but a lot of these different rituals that we have lost in our society and
Mhm.
how to regain them or reintroduce them in situations like that. So if you have any loved ones experiencing that, it's a fantastic book that actually opened my eyes to this topic, even though it's not at all related to what we're talking about now. So
It's all related.
yeah. So you're here. Um, what was what turned, what changed in that weekend?
Mm, I realized that my whole self-concept, and part of this was work, was about being competent, about carrying the weight for other people, about being the head of the family or the provider, all of those, I guess you'd say more traditional roles. And now that was built into me. And so it was kind of, and it was based on this flawed assumption that I was the star of the movie. And everybody else are like non-player characters in my kids' words, in my movie or in my video game. And then it was really just this humbling experience of like, yeah, I don't know which end is up, and I'm not that important. And in the grand scheme of things, none of this is, and there are no right answers. So I think like the birth of humility.
Mm.
God, I don't know if that's the right word, but um, yeah, and a comfort with unknowingness. I guess the word that comes to mind is surrender. Like before I'd be the planner, I'd have plans, like in 5 years I'm going to be retired. Okay, that passed. Okay, in another 5 years I'll be retired. Whatever my financial, and I'll own a house, I'll have kids. There's like you kind of plan in this limited way, but we're doing this in the middle of this broiling cauldron of the universe, and
Mhm.
there's no way to plan your way through it. So
Mhm.
the first step, like I guess in 12-step programs, not that I've been in one, but is admitting you have a problem. And so the problem is you thinking that I can control the world and control outcomes in the world.
Isn't
That's at the root of
control.
workaholism, I think.
Yeah, and by the way, I'm hearing little nods to your book. I
Mm.
absolutely love your book, Unleash Your Primal Brain, but you talk about a lot of this in there as well, and kind of what drives us at just a guttural, instinctual, brain-based level.
Yeah, and that the conscious mind and the planning mind and they have very little to contribute to
Yeah.
that process.
Yeah, but control is protection. It's a sense of control makes us feel safe
Yeah,
in
but
an
what we're
unsafe
doing
world.
though is, like all animals, is operating on a mental model of the world, and the world's way too complex to put even in our brains or a mental model. So that's what
Yeah.
I mean. Like, there's got to be an element of surrender, and I'm not particularly a religious person, but kind of that thy will be done or something like along those lines, right? It's like it's what's going to happen is going to happen, and no amount of my planning, or I used to read a lot of military history, and there's a famous quote by, I think, of von Clausewitz, who said, "No battle plan survives first contact with the enemy."
Hmm.
Just a similar idea, just like you plan all you want, or in Mike Tyson's immortal words, it's all fun and games until you get hit. Same idea.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm looking over here because I'm looking at my wall at my statement of the year, which is I will be present to what is unfolding and create from it. It's
Mm,
just if we can't be in the present and seeing what is emerging, it's really difficult for us to create the most that we can. That doesn't mean we can't plan, but holding plans lightly is very critical.
mhm.
I think for us to thrive in these spaces of change and ambiguity, because it's really tough.
Yeah, well, that's in the space of change and ambiguity. You just described life. All of life is that. I mean, there's no safety anywhere. There's no certainty anywhere. And
Mhm.
I think it's hard if you're more of a black and white thinker and you want stuff in neat little boxes.
I was a very black and white thinker for many years, so
Yeah.
still go there sometimes. So surrender. So it was about surrendering to you. So then once you surrendered, what were you surrendering to?
Hmm. Well, I think it was for me. It was let's do things that are directional. So it's not about goals, like I said, is in, okay, I had goals, which I hit,
Mhm.
I'm going to plasma TV, I'm going to buy Mercedes, I'm going to build my dream house. I actually did all three of those things. That was on my roadmap in my 20s, I was like,
Mhm.
but that wasn't the payoff. So like so now it's directional. Like you mentioned your, I guess, what do you call it, vision statement or purpose statement.
Mhm.
I've revisited that over the years. And my current one that I came out of this Mankind Project initiation that I mentioned is I co-create a world of peace, safety, and love through joyous expression and service.
Mhm.
That's my bag. So that's kind of like the North Star. And pretty much everything I put through that values filter when I'm confronted with the situation, I go, okay, well, is that close to my purpose or on purpose for me or not? And if it's not, then I really don't give a crap about it. It doesn't
Mhm.
perturb me. It doesn't do
Mhm.
anything negative. It's just like non-operative.
Yeah.
And if it is on purpose, then I'll put my energy into it.
So you're surrendering to the flow of energy that aligns directionally to your purpose. Like I'm
So,
picturing, you're on a water down a hill, and you're like, I'm running on the rafts,
yep.
but you also are releasing noise, and releasing that also means not only releasing engaging in it and working in it and happiness for it, but it also means releasing anger and other like being
Yeah,
wrapped
it's
up
like
in the things that
the
don't
way that
matter.
I describe it is I care more and more about less and less.
I like it. That's beautifully said. I care more and more about less and less.
Yeah.
I love that. That's flipping brilliant, Tim.
Yeah. That's my insight for today. Let's stop the interview.
Right there,
I'm
right
tapped out.
there.
Yeah.
Mic drop. All right. So you surrendered, and you had a 5-year journey to get to where you are today. So
Yeah.
if you were to like describe it in, colors and pictures and concepts, like how would you describe that journey, that 5 years that emerged?
Uh Start with where you are instead of where you want to be. Just like, so an inventory of, okay, warts and all, who you are, what your situation is, what your strengths are. And I
Mhm.
don't mean like making little lists, pro and con or anything that deliberate, but I just mean like having a realistic allowance for being an incomplete, broken human being, which we all are.
Mhm.
And so I like this phrase, perfectly imperfect.
Mm.
That you can't be good at everything. You don't have infinite amounts of time. You can be the best violin player in the world, but you might be a shitty human being in terms of your relationship with your kids or something like that. Because
Mhm.
if you put it all in parenting, then you'll neglect your health. And there's just like, we're always trying to figure out what to prioritize, how to rebalance, and we're never going to be perfect or good at anything. And then even if you do get good at something, who says that was a good investment of your time and life force?
Mhm. Yeah.
So I think like starting with that sense of no, it's always going to be a work in progress. There is no end goal, I think is important. And that's why that purpose statement is directional. Okay,
Mhm.
I can never stop co-creating a world of peace, safety, and love. There's no end state to that. You just keep going in that direction.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's important.
So here you are 5 years ago, you faced your workaholic. When
Mhm.
did you know that your workaholic was gone and dead?
Um, it's the amount of time I'm putting into work and the quality of my relationships with other people.
Mhm.
Those are the metrics, I guess. That's again, if you're making progress. So maybe it's just a function of my age and being middle aged at this point, but I don't like to work hard anymore. I mean,
Mm.
a good 2-3 hours is a good day.
Mhm.
And I like the flexibility of the lack of structure. I mean, the way at this point, I'm a solopreneur. I do keynote speaking and writing and advisory with executives primarily. But they put meetings on my calendar, 9 to 5 Pacific time, Monday through Friday, and then I can block off my personal time or trips, or if I want to go to the beach. They can only put stuff on my calendar at reasonable hours. Before it was just like, oh, okay, we have clients in Australia. They're 7 hours earlier, and I have clients in Europe and they're 10 hours ahead. And I would always try to accommodate all that. And it's like, no way, not,
Mhm.
so yeah, put the big rocks in first, that kind of saying is, so it's like sleep is first, exercise is first, social relationships are first, self-care stuff like going to my energy work or my men's circle, which meets weekly. Then all of that stuff gets prioritized way ahead of work. And
Mhm.
ironically, it's gotten easy. The work has gotten easier. Like I can do a lot more with this kind of broad-based wisdom approach, I guess you would call it, as opposed to just running faster on the gerbil wheel.
Yeah. Are you saying you can do more and more with less and less?
You got me
See,
there.
you're brilliance, man. Like, I think we got a theme.
Yeah, yeah. And it's more like it's effortless. I think it's what it is like turning down the noise in yourself.
Mhm.
Then you can pick up on much more subtle energies around you. Um, there's this phrase, not mine, that I use a lot, that I like, which is, "Who you are screams so loudly that I can't hear what you're saying." Right? So we got this buzz saw, this armor we're leading with, or who we are, what masks we wear, all of that, and it doesn't, because we're putting out energy, we can't pick up subtle stuff. We can't pick up subtle signals. And as soon as you drop down into that quiet place, I'm no meditator or anything like that, but I'm just saying, as long as you start listening for more subtle things, then you realize, oh, there's other available energy. So doing more with less isn't, it's less of me, it's actually more energy, but it's just coming through me as a channel from outside. Various synchronicities come into play, flow
Mhm.
state, whatever you want to call it. It just seems to get triggered more frequently, so it seems effortless because I'm not doing the work.
And I know you said you're not a meditator, but if you are stopping to be quiet and listening to subtleties, you're meditating. I'm just, just gonna say, you
But
slap
there's
whatever
just like,
label you on it you want, but you're being mindful.
okay, fair enough. But I'm just, it's amazing to me how I have these giant gaps in my awareness. Like a few months ago, the energy worker that I've been seeing, just
Mhm.
incredible healer, she says, well, why didn't you pay attention this week to sound and all
Mhm.
the sounds going on around you? And I realized, I shit you not, that 98% of the time I am completely tuning out sound. It's only if something impinges on me, like, a honking car horn or something like that, or a vacuum cleaner, or that kind of stuff gets my sound attention. But unless I'm actively paying attention to it, I'm completely shut down to sound.
Oh,
It's really
wow.
weird. So it's like these giant gaps, so it's hard to be aware of everything all the time and to stay in the present moment.
Yeah, and part of it's not chasing those sounds. Like, you know what I mean? If you can experience them all without trying to sort through them, it opens you up to a whole different way of seeing the world around you.
Yep.
So that's beautiful. But you also said something really powerful I want to go back to. So you talked about we're so loud sometimes, the armor that we wear, the that we lead with.
Hmm.
And one of the things that you kind of said in there under that is that we are not our armor. Like, who we are is not that armor that we bring forward. That just is a culmination of our experiences and our mindsets on the world. But who we are is actually softer and deeper and more fuller and richer. So who have you found you are, Tim?
Hmm. Like I said, I lean into that warrior archetype. So if we're going to use kind of Jungian terms, a dear friend of mine who's my mentor, I met him through the Mankind Project, David Gruder, this amazing a human being. He kind of has this modified Jungian framework, and he says you basically need four types of energies. The warrior we already talked about, counterposed with the lover. That's the kind of being versus doing axis. And then
Mhm.
you need the magician, the alchemist, the transformer versus the steward, which is the tradition keeper and wants order and things like that. So that's the change versus stasis axis. But above it all, you need that purpose. You need the sovereign,
Mhm.
the king, the queen, that can use all of those instruments organically in the moment to have the right response. So like I need
Mhm.
20% lover energy mixed with 70% magician energy right now. But the sovereign is the one that decides that that's what the situation calls for. So I think what was most powerful for me in terms of becoming is really having that clear sense of purpose, because the sovereign's like the orchestra conductor,
Yep. Yep.
right?
I
It's
have
like
one as well. So
yeah, and that's the one that says, what's your larger purpose? What's your connection to source?
yeah.
So that one points upward, and all the other four are like the orchestra players and the playing of your daily life. So I guess my goal now is to be fully expressed, so I have access to all those other four energies, warrior, lover, magician, and steward, and have a clear sense of purpose, so that individually they don't try to come into the center where the vacuum is and run my life like the warrior did for many years.
Yeah. I love that. So do you know what your sovereign, my sovereign actually has a form and a shape, and I know exactly how they show up. Does yours have that yet? Have you
Well,
put
to me,
any?
that's the purpose part. So
Yes.
and in fact, so
Beautiful.
I gave you one of my purpose statement, and that's the purpose of my kind of positive spirit animal in the Native American tradition, which
Mhm.
is the peaceful lion. I
Mm.
co-create a world of peace, safety, and love through joyous expression and service. But you also need to be aware of your shadow, what's
Mhm.
behind you, what drives your life when it's unconscious,
Mm.
and that spirit animal in my shadow is the raging bear, and it's got a purpose too. And the purpose is, I create a world of disconnection, loneliness, and pain by acting like a victim, indulging in self-righteous anger, and seeking distractions.
Mm. I'm smiling because one of my past interviewers talked about the bear as well as his shadow, and he goes, "I'm just trying to stay ahead of the bear."
Well, and by the way, shadow is something that never goes away. If you
Mhm.
cast light, you're gonna. I mean, if you have light inside of you, you're gonna generate shadows. The point is to bring them into your conscious awareness. In Mankind Project, we talk about putting the shadow in front of you. It's like, oh, there you are, you little fucker, doing that thing again. So it's just catching that negative mission as earlier as possible. You don't have to do anything with it. It's not like, oh, I'm going to
Mhm.
fight against my, I just spent a day binge watching Netflix. Okay. And that's seeking distractions in my case,
Mhm.
so it falls in that category. I mean, I'm not going to beat myself up about it, but if I catch myself doing it early, maybe I'll just stop with episode 4 instead of watching the whole season.
Mhm. I love it. I love it. Well, and what we resist, we cannot actually learn from. That's part
Yeah,
of
because you're
the
rejecting it. In fact, you're
dichotomy.
giving it energetically, you're giving it more energy to keep it locked in place.
Yeah, you got it. You got it. Well, mine's a singer, by the way. So
Yeah.
my sovereign is a singer. So it's
Right on.
yeah,
Well,
it's
I've heard you sing. You're amazing.
that she orchestrates, to your point. She can go very soft and fall into the background. She can get very loud. But it's the ability to change energy and move with the environment and the needs around me in the world is what her superpower is, and how she brings to bear with the rest of my.
Yeah, and I think a lot, like, I'm guessing your singing manifested early in life, and the same thing. Like, what I found is, I've had these hints, I've had these resources and allies all along. The seeds weren't ready to blossom. So, one example is, I did saber fencing when I was in college, and that's a pretty aggro sport. Let's, trying to cut someone with a sword. But I also studied Tai Chi as a martial art, and the Taoist principles behind that are like rebalancing in the moment
Love
and
Tai Chi.
never opposing anything. And it's very different than most traditional external martial arts. And so, like, I studied that for 5 years. Here's 20 years later, I have access to it, and now it means something different in my life. So I think all of us have those seeds. We just need to pay attention to which ones we want to water.
Yeah, which this is so perfect. I was just telling you, I just finished reading the book Alchemist for the first time. And like,
Mm,
how perfect is that to the topic of that book?
exactly.
The
Yeah.
idea that we need to integrate all of it and be present to all of it in order to allow those seeds to manifest and grow. Everything we need is already inside of us.
Or in the eternal words of Voltaire and Candide, I think one of the last lines, and so I will cultivate my garden.
Oh, I love
That was
it.
one of
I
the very
love it.
last lines of that book.
I love it. So here is the fun part where I get to um where I get to kind of try to recap. what you said. So
Uh-oh.
number one is you have to experience pain, and more specifically, you have to pay attention to the signs of pain and not rationalize or write stories around it. But there has to be enough pain that you are willing to experience to be able to make the change.
Yeah, until pain reaches a certain threshold, we're not going to do anything about it.
There you go. All right. So now step two, put yourself outside of your comfort zone. Because if you're in your comfort zone, you can't really make change. So in that space of uncertainty, but I also heard you say where you feel psychologically safe and some sense of confidence that you're embarking on a path that will help you get to where you want to go. I got like this beautiful little, yes.
Well, like the journey of 1,000 miles starts with this single step. I think it's like it's you don't have to know your end state in that sense. It's just it's directional.
Yeah.
So just small steps, they're not going to be as painful. It's like, oh, I got to change my whole life and my relationship to business and my family and my health. And it's like, that's too overwhelming. You're just like, I'm going to take one little tiny step in the right direction.
And yours was the Mankind Project. And
yeah, I was going through that initiation weekend. Yeah.
It's amazing.
Mankind Project. It's called the New Warrior Training Adventure.
Okay. New Warrior. I love that. Then step three, realizing that you're not the star in your own show. But that everybody is all acting together, and we're part of one very larger story that we can't even see from our own myopic viewpoint.
Yeah, and my brother tells me I'm wrong in this, in my simplistic understanding of this, but in Buddhism, there's this notion of dependent co-arising. Like they view the universe as like this lattice of jewels in this, matrix, if you will, and everyone is refracting light and facets of all the others. So you take one tiny little piece, however indirect or far away, that's going to affect the whole universe. So the notion is like the whole universe can't exist without every piece of it being there.
Yeah. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. We're definitely part of something larger. It's just, how do you define larger? That's what I always say. Step number four, surrender to where you are and align it directionally with a purpose.
Yes. Be honest about where you are, where you're starting, what your strengths and weaknesses are. And yeah, purpose is, again, that idea of the sovereign in the Jungian psychology. You're only on autopilot when one of your servants, whether it's the warrior, the lover, the magician, or the steward, is running the show, and they're just trying to come into the center and do what they can because there's a vacuum of purpose. So the earlier you find your purpose, and this goes back to Viktor Frankl and Man's Search for Meaning, he believed all of his therapy was developed on the idea that everybody needs to find and express their individual meaning in life. And so the earlier you find that, in a way, the luckier you are. Yeah.
And I've learned it takes iterations, but it's all on a similar theme. So like I had my first purpose at age 15, and then reset it at about 25 because so much had changed, but it didn't fundamentally change. The expression of it just changed. So it went from being, my earlier one was when I find a place that exists beyond my wildest imaginations and exceeds my greatest expectations. That's when I know I'm alive. And that turned into, I make glorious mistakes, and in doing so, invite others to do the same. It went from a me-focused to a world-focused view, but the idea is still the same. It's a comfort with making mistakes and putting yourself out there beyond what you're comfortable with.
The perfectly imperfect part.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So beautiful. Okay. So then the next one is you started to care more and more about less and less. I am going to totally write this one down. I love it. Quotable right there.
Yeah. And, the Mark Manson's got this book, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. And he basically says it's similar stuff. I mean, it's just this wisdom's existed for thousands of years. Is like life is suffering, first truth of the Buddha, right? And it's about, what's worth suffering for, what's your value stack, and it's like certain things you passionately care about, and other things like crying babies on planes, who cares, someone cut me off in traffic, who cares, it just, in fact, that Buddhist term of nirvana, most people think that's like some blissed out state and communing with God. It actually means like the extinguishing of something, like a fire, the going out of all desire. So you almost like you experience life with a stoic equanimity.
Mm.
Nothing perturbs you because all is as it should be in the first place. So,
Mm-hmm.
and I think ultimately, if you're really spiritually evolved, I guess you end up there. But I'm just trying to narrow down the set of things that perturbs me.
I love it. I love it. A very reasonable goal for all of us. So, and then that's the next step. Know when you've arrived. And what I heard is you arrive when, for you at least, it was you spent less time on work. And I love how kind of we took that same. You worked, you did more and more with less and less time and started to realize like what really is important here. And then the second thing is the quality of your relationships and life outside of work grew
Yeah.
and evolved. And those two things
And through
combined.
work, I mean, we met through work. I'm
Yeah.
super grateful for our friendship and deep
Mhm.
connection. And it's like, so there's no work-life boundary, not because you're trying to cram so much into it. It's just like you're showing up as a human for other humans.
Yeah, what a great clarification. I love that. One of my dear friends once said that. She goes, I've learned over the years that just showing up for a human means showing up for a human, and it doesn't actually matter what capacity you're doing that in.
Yeah, that's
It's
some artificial
inspired me.
boundary in this kind of hyper-capitalist society we live in,
I
whatever.
love it. I love that.
Not buying it.
Oh, I love it. I love it. And then along the way, a couple of tips I heard was sleep, eat, exercise, and prioritize your key supports. Like understand that those things come first and then the rest of it comes after. Because if you are taking care of yourself and your relationships, you can actually take care of the other things that need to be taken care of in life.
Yeah, and I would say, and this is stuff out of my book as well, Unleash Your Primal Brain, Demystifying How We Think and Why We Act. There, you're holding up your copy of it. Yeah. And it's really, sleep is foundational. Most people it's like diet, exercise, and sleep is a distant third. That should really be inverted. Sleep is daily life support, and really bad shit happens if you don't get 7 to 9 hours of sleep on the regular.
Yeah.
So all forms of life on earth that lives longer than a few days has some form of sleep. It's not an accident, and you can't, uh, spend time on your phone instead, okay, when going to sleep. So that's
And
first.
the sleep drives the other two. I agree,
Yeah.
because if you aren't sleeping well, it actually affects your appetite, your
Your weight,
cravings for
weight
food, your
loss, okay,
energy and ability to exercise.
creativity,
All of that flows down. Yeah.
relationships with other people. You assume they're more aggressive towards you than they really are. All kinds of bad stuff happens if you don't get sleep. But then the other part is the quality of your social support. There's a long-running longitudinal study that was done with a cohort of Harvard freshmen and their Southie Boston poor cousins. And they've been running this thing for like 70, 80 years and doing really detailed follow-ups on these people. And the quality of your social support and your social network and social connections has the same medical impact on your life as being a 2-pack a day smoker if you have poor social supports.
Wow.
That's how important it is. So like, you can laugh at barefoot people in Africa, but if they're sitting around a campfire and yucking it up and having a meal together, chances are their life's actually better than yours, because you're stressed out about the mortgage and worrying about whether someone likes something on your social media post. I mean, that's a miserable, lonely life.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Amen to that. And then the last one, which I think you just got at, ditch the noise. Ditch the noise, because unless when there's all this noise, you can't actually hear what's going on in the present inside of you, but learn to release the noise. And like you said, whether it's the things that perturb you or the things inside of you, eliminate the noise.
Yeah. I do a little, it's not a journal, but I just jot down a few bullet points before I go to bed, in a gratitude sense. Like it could be as little as, okay, I said I love you to my daughter and she says I love you too. That's a rare thing in teenage land, right?
Yes, I know. I've been having that lately, and I'm on a high at the moment because
yeah,
of it.
exactly. Or you're on a walk and the cat comes up to you and decides to grace you with his presence and say hello and let you pet its belly. It's like, so it's the God of small things is how I describe it.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Oh, any final words of wisdom for us, Tim?
Well, I haven't had any yet, but
You've
I
had so
now got to
much.
manufacture something. No, like it just work is this sick thing that's just we absorb culturally. I mean, how we talk about work and workaholism, stuff like that. It's a disease. Get back to your heart and your full in souled self.
Mm-hmm.
That's maybe I learned that a bit too late, but it's never too late.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Well, you guys, you'll find Tim's full bio and how to reach him on the show notes. But I really want to emphasize the point that counts the most, which is that he's a father, an amazing human being, and helps people really understand, how you tick and how do you want to show up differently in the world. So check out his book. I love it. It actually helps you understand how you tick.
That part, you just go to primalbrain.com or timash.com. You
Perfect.
can reach me there. Yeah.
I love it. I love it. All right. Well, thank you so much, Tim. You have a fantastic day.
Thanks. You too, Jenny Lynn. It's been an honor and a pleasure.